Tonight on NewsWatch, countdown to the midterms, how the president's health care plan is giving a big boost to Republicans in this year's election.
Plus, a possible lead in the search for Flight 370, the new satellite images that have some wondering if the plane has been found.
And CBN News heads to Chicago to meet a group who's trying to stomp out sex trafficking. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Good evening. I'm Mark Martin.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. Well, if many conservatives get their way, come November, there will be a shakeup in the Senate.
Polls consistently show that the growing unpopularity of the president's health care plan could have major implications in this year's midterm elections. David Brody has the story.
The Affordable Care Act may be known as Obamacare, but for Democrats seeking re-election, it's becoming more like Obama scare. Case in point, Democrat Alex Sink got sunk by Republican challenger David Jolly during a special election in Florida last week.
Wow.
Jolly campaigned on repealing Obamacare and won. Sink embraced Obamacare and lost.
That is the big challenge for Democrats running for re-election up here on Capitol Hill. They all voted for Obamacare, but now they're trying to distance themselves from it. And if they don't, they may not be up here next year.
Democrats currently control the Senate, but Republicans could take over by picking up 6 seats. Their strategy? Focus on Democrats from conservative states who voted for Obamacare. They include Alaska Senator Mark Begich, Kay Hagan in North Carolina, Mary Landrieu in Louisiana, Mark Udall in Colorado, and the vulnerable Mark Pryor down in Arkansas.
I know we have a ton of outside money that is coming in against me right now. They're going to say all kinds of things and try to convince people that I'm really not the kind of senator they wanted over the last 12 years. But the truth is I have a great relationship with the state. There's a trust relationship there.
Conservative groups are questioning that trust, with ads reminding voters that Pryor backed Obamacare and that it's hurting folks in Arkansas.
We received a letter from our insurance company as of December of 2014 that we would no longer be covered by Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Pryor says he understands the frustration.
I've been frustrated with the rollout, no question about that. I know people in Arkansas are frustrated with it. You know, that was a hard piece of legislation to pass.
Pryor agrees changes need to be made, but he's sticking by the controversial law.
If you get 80% of it right, you've really done something. And I think we did get a lot of it right. I don't know if we did 80%, 90%, 70%, I don't know. But we got a lot of it right. But it's far from perfect.
From the beginning, Obamacare has been under a dark cloud. First, the website crashed, then came the policy cancellations that refuted President Obama's promise that Americans could keep their health care insurance, and the list goes on. One top House Democrat doesn't believe Obamacare will become the party's death knell.
How do Democrats take control back of the House, and can it be doable in this climate of everybody trying to bash Obamacare?
Well, I do think that Democrats will pick up additional seats in the House. The question, of course, is whether you can get to the magic number of 17, which is what Democrats need to get the majority in the House. And look, there's a lot of time between now in November, politically speaking. A lot can change.
Will these Democrats turn to the president for help during their campaigns? His popularity is sinking fast.
Whether or not the president campaigns in person in every district of the country, is something both the president will decide whether he has time to do it and whether or not, members make that request.
Right now, the request from vulnerable Democrats is to figure out how not to get sunk by Obamacare. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Phil Kirkman from American Commitment joins us now with more. Phil, do you expect to see more Democrats running away from President Obama as we get closer to November?
Yeah, I think they're certainly going to try to get away from Obama and Obamacare more specifically, but it's going to be very difficult for them to do that because they all voted for it. They all echoed his famous broken promise that if you like your plan, you can keep it. And as much as they want to talk about fixing it, the American people know they're the ones who broke it, and I don't know that they'll be trusted to fix it. And I think that's one of the lessons coming out of that Florida special election.
Do you think Republicans are doing enough, though, to capitalize on the failure of Obamacare?
I think there are very positive signs that they are. I think the House has voted many times, not just to repeal the law, but really to fix the worst and most egregious aspects of it. And so far, the Senate Democrats have been unwilling to even take any of those measures up, to debate them, to amend them, to actually show that they mean it when they say they want to fix the law. So I think Republicans have done a pretty good job of spotlighting that. The question is whether they can just continue to keep that pressure up for another 6 months through the election.
Democrats like to blame the insurance companies instead of the Affordable Care Act itself. Is that working for them at all?
I don't think it is. I think that most people see this law for what it is, which was basically collusion between big government and big business. All of the major insurance companies spent millions of dollars pushing for the law, spent millions of dollars on lobbyists, helped write the law, and they're getting direct payments under a variety of bailout programs embedded in the law. So the idea that they're on opposite sides, I think that's just not credible. People see this as what it is, the insurance companies and the bureaucrats and politicians getting together.
How do you think the midterm elections are going to play out? Do you think Republicans will gain control of the Senate, Phil?
I do think so. I think we'll see the Senate switch. I think not only will we see a number of red state Democrats lose this cycle, but I think even some of the purple state Democrats or even blue states like Michigan, the Democrats may have a lot of trouble specifically because of the Obamacare issue. And so I think we will see a Republican Senate, and I think we will see Republican pickups in the House as well.
Okay. Phil Kirkman, president of American Commitment. Thanks for your insights, as always.
My pleasure.
A sighting of debris could be a big lead in the search for Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. And it comes as frustration is growing for families whose loved ones were on that plane. John Waggy has details.
It's not confirmed that the objects spotted in the Indian Ocean are from Flight 370. But after long days of fruitless searching, it's something new.
This is a lead. It is probably the best lead we have right now, but we need to get there, find them, see them, assess them to know whether it's really meaningful or not.
Military search planes from Australia, the U.S. and New Zealand have all headed to the area.
We'd like to find something to give a bit of closure and answers to the family and relatives of the people on board the Malaysian Airlines flight. But if we don't find something as well, there's always hope that maybe the aircraft's somewhere else and they're safe and sound.
Authorities caution that visibility is poor and the images they saw via satellite were very indistinct. But one of the floating objects is nearly 80 feet long, the other about 15 feet.
We have been in this business of doing search and rescue and using satellite images before, and they do not always turn out to be related to the search, even if they look good.
Experts say the size of the debris actually has them questioning whether it's from the missing Malaysian flight. Normally, something so large wouldn't survive a crash. Flight 370 vanished on March 8th with 239 passengers and crew aboard. For Malaysian officials under fire from around the world, even a hint of an answer is welcome.
Basically, if we can confirm that the debris identified this morning is the exact debris and efforts are now being made to go to that location, the next step is to actually find the black box.
For loved ones of the passengers and crew, the wait is painful. This father of one passenger says, "We are still waiting for the results of forensic examination by the Australian government. If it turns out that it is Malaysian Air Flight 370, then we will accept that." As the search continues, the FBI is helping to analyze deleted data from a flight simulator found in the captain's home. They might hold hints of unusual flight paths that could help explain where the plane went. John Waggy, CBN News.
Expanding sanctions in Russia tonight. President Obama announced additional sanctions against high-level Russian officials and associates of President Vladimir Putin. The president also warns of the possibility of even harsher penalties if Moscow doesn't take a step back in Ukraine. Mr. Obama says he signed an executive order giving the U.S. the power to impose harsh new sanctions on what he calls key sectors of the Russian economy. Meanwhile, Russia continues to tighten its grip on Crimea.
And as tensions in eastern Ukraine are also rising, a group of Christians recently came face to face with an angry mob of pro-Russian demonstrators. George Thomas has that story.
March 16th. Gennady Mokhnenko and 6 Americans traveling on this bus had just finished ministering at a women's prison. when dozens of pro-Russian demonstrators confronted them on the street.
I was really afraid about my team.
The confrontation was filmed and uploaded to YouTube. It happened here in the southeastern Ukrainian city of Mariupol, not too far from Russia's border.
It was just real aggressive and very, very crazy people. I can't believe this.
Mokhneko runs a Christian orphan ministry. He says the demonstrators who were chanting Russia, Russia tried to pull his team off the bus. Fortunately, they managed to get away unhurt, but not before windows were smashed and their tires shot. The incident made the local news. Mokhneko says Russia is sending men across the border to cities like Mariupol to instigate chaos and create a reason for a broader Russian invasion of Ukraine.
I have 32 adopted children. I'm afraid about my children. We have real chance for war.
Ukraine's prime minister says such instigators will be dealt with.
Law enforcement agencies have gathered convincing evidence of the participation of Russian special forces in organizing unrest in the east of our country. There is no place in Ukraine for these warmongers.
Violent protests have broken out in several key regions in mainly Russian-speaking eastern Ukraine. And in some cases, pro-Russian demonstrators have taken over government buildings, replacing the European Union flag with the Russian flag. This map shows the extent of the pro-Russian protests. For example, in Donetsk, north of Mariupol, hundreds of demonstrators stormed a government security building this week. The clashes between those for and against Russia are becoming more frequent and violent. The stakes couldn't be higher. Russia is adding more troops and military equipment at its border with Ukraine, poised to easily take cities like Kharkov and Donetsk and advance as far as Kiev, the capital, within 2 or 3 hours. George Thomas, CBN News.
Thanks, George. Coming up, why some suffering from cancer aren't able to go to the doctors who focus on this disease.
Cancer patients relieved to get insurance coverage through the president's health care plan may be in for a big disappointment.
That's because some of the nation's best cancer centers are now off limits under the new law. Lori Johnson has that story.
Just 4 of the top 19 cancer hospitals say patients have access if insured through their state exchanges. The Associated Press made that discovery in a nationwide survey of comprehensive cancer centers with higher survival rates. Even well-known insurance companies are scaling back cancer coverage under the exchanges.
Okay.
Doctors and administrators say they're concerned patients may not be able to get the most advanced treatment, including clinical trials of new medications.
There are 100,000 people in the Washington exchanges, and what we say right now is the majority of those people will not be able to receive their care here.
Industry analysts say less choice means lower costs.
These exchange networks are very narrow, and they're narrow by design to try to keep the costs very low for consumers.
Some insurers say customers on the state exchanges are willing to make trade-offs for affordable coverage, and analysts note many were uninsurable before the new health care law. For now, the issue seems to be limited to the new insurance exchanges, but some warn it could become a concern for Americans with job-based coverage if employers turn to more narrow networks. The Obama administration says networks will get closer scrutiny next year in the 36 states served by the federal exchange. Adding cancer care will be a priority. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
In other health news, not getting enough sleep might literally kill your brain cells. A new study on mice found the lack of sleep did damage to the brain, and getting extra hours of sleep later may not be enough to make up for it. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania say their findings provide evidence that not getting enough shut-eye really can lead to irreversible injury in key parts of the brain.
Up next, we'll ride shotgun as a group works to stop trafficking, sex trafficking in Chicago. Human trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes in America. In fact, it now challenges the drug trade as the most profitable criminal enterprise in the country.
In Chicago, police realize they cannot fight this problem alone, so they're getting help. Ephraim Graham explains in tonight's Focus Report.
Chicago's beauty attracts more than 40 million visitors a year. The city offers more than 200 theaters, a magnificent mile of high-end shops, and 26 miles of lakefront. But that busyness and beauty also brings an ugly side to the big city.
We've got officers that really care.
Chicago police are working to solve more than 220 missing person cases. And a growing number of those are children being trafficked for sex.
It just gets to me sometime, not sometime, all the time, trying to rescue these kids in the condition that they're in. Dehydrated, you can see the ribs, just standing there, no shoes, eyes bloodshot red, body been abused.
Fighting this crime wave takes more than a gun and a uniform. You need street perspective. That's where community activist Andrew Holmes and former cop Carlos Rodriguez come in.
When we're on the street with working side by side with the Chicago Police Department, providing them with information that they know that there are children involved. And you know, a police officer will take a lot of calls, but when it's a child, that's a sore spot for any police officer.
Both now work as private investigators with Morrison Security.
She fits the physical description of a 14-year-old that might be missing out there.
And they lead the firm's volunteer effort to rescue victims of sex trafficking.
Carlos and Andrew Holmes, you know, they're the rock stars. They're the real rock stars of this whole thing. They're my heroes, and I always tell them that.
Sean Morrison owns the business and doesn't charge victims' families for the search and rescue.
We seem to have been called to this, and we do look at it as a calling. People say, why do you do this? And my response has always been, if we don't do it, who is going to do it?
We have a phone center. It's a 1-800-YOU-TELL-US. And a lot of people call our phone center because they don't want to call the police, because they're afraid.
On our visit,
now, were you able to run that through our photo recognition?
they take a call about a missing 16-year-old. After talking to police,
we figured we try to take this guy down, rescue these kids first.
And scouring online sex ads.
She was on this morning, this girl, and if you look at the pictures of her, her body's not even developed yet.
They follow a lead to a nearby hotel.
Have you seen this gentleman coming in here late at night or late in the evening times?
And when somebody calls us and says, my child's missing, we can't go, okay, well, we'll get back to you tomorrow. You know, we have to drop whatever we're involved in, and we need to address it immediately.
One day after receiving that call, Carlos and Andrew tracked down the missing girl.
Give me 5 minutes, just look out the window.
At an abandoned house on the city's south side.
You've been staying here a while, haven't you?
This is what it looks like inside what's known as a trap house.
There's a bed back here. So they'll come up here. This is where they sleep at night. It never gets old because there's always another one. But to deliver her hand in hand to her family, oh, it means so much to me. It's mean glory to me. My prayers have been answered.
Andrew reunites this victim with her uncle.
How am I feeling right now? I feel so blessed right now. My daughter just graduated yesterday, and just to find her is just another blessing in itself.
This day's happy ending becomes the latest of more than 85 rescues performed by the security firm.
Our first mission is to rescue these children from off the streets and get them back to their families or get them into an environment where they have safety. Our second mission is to educate.
All of this is private. This is off limits. All of this is off limits.
Just hours later, Andrew heads again to the city's south side, this time warning children at the Southside Worship Center about the danger.
We had no idea that it was happening right here. I had no idea.
The church's pastor, Titus Lee, makes it his mission to teach the children and adults in his congregation. He even turned a Wednesday night Bible study into a workshop on sex trafficking.
I realized that if the church is silent, we're going to lose more young people. We must be vocal. We must be proactive. and we must engage.
The pastor and father of young daughters says his eyes are certainly more watchful.
When I look at a girl walking alone now with her head down, I wonder, is she one? Where's her home? Is she out here wandering, and or where is she under someone else's control? Or is she headed that way without intervention? You know, when I see them on their cell phones scrolling now, who are they communicating with? It's reality. They're victims and probably victimizers. It could be right in community and or in the church.
And while Morrison Security has rescued several victims in his church's neighborhood, many potential targets remain across the city.
They cover the whole spectrum from A to Z as far as background goes, you know, educated, some are not educated, you know, some are middle-class families. We even have law enforcement personnel.
Human trafficking is a speeding train, moving faster than even police can track. And they say its profit engine could soon overtake the drug trade. Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Chicago.
Up next, why one field of goats in Pennsylvania is gaining international attention. You got to see this one.
All right, Mark, the story is not funny. But do not laugh.
Too late.
Scared stiff is taking on a whole new meaning in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
That's right. Folks passing by a field there often see a strange sight, fainting goats. Yes, the goats are easily startled, and when that happens, all of their muscles freeze. Look at that. He just collapsed. The goats go stiff and fall over. Videos of the collapsing goats have been gaining attention online.
I didn't think my claim to fame was going to be my fainting goats. I am called the crazy goat lady by many, just because I love my goats. It doesn't hurt them at all. It's completely muscular. It doesn't affect any other system. Whoops, come here, buddy. Here.
Well, that's good. It's not hurting them. Well, the fainting happens because of a genetic disorder in the goats, and there are currently 83 of the animals at the Pennsylvania farm and 44 of them babies.
So this doesn't happen to all goats.
No.
Just some goats.
Just a few. I
That's
would
good.
stop and stare too, I have to admit. That's all. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.